ensuring that everyone lives freely and enjoys the fact that they are alive within the borders of the country of South Africa. Despite all the challenges that we have, I think South Africa is a beacon of hope across the continent of Africa. However, I think many of us are still not celebrating because we do not have human rights. I don't think I will celebrate until Alex is similar to Santen, until the inequality that we witness every day before our eyes is removed. Thank you.
Hello, Cathy and your team and SAFM listeners. This is time we're here in Ladysmith. We thank all these commemorations. We thank you for the reminders. Guys, please continue to remind us of such events. But please, we need to know the names of the people who were in charge on that day. We need to know the commanders who were in charge of that day. We need to know what consequences followed thereafter. We need to know if they were arrested. We need to know if there were commissions. We need to know who was the president at the time. Thank you.
Cathy, if we are not well governed as a people, as a nation, that's crime against humanity. That's violations of our rights to live, to be governed properly. If you're not getting water, electricity, there's no security, crime is there, unemployment. That's crime against humanity by the government itself, by the ANC itself. So there's a violation of rights, left, right, and center by the government itself. So we can't write anything home about Human Rights Day. Thanks, we'll hear in Kuma.
#SAFM Talking Point.
All right, thanks for all of those WhatsApp voice notes. Let me welcome my guest onto the show this morning. Professor Denyuko Maluleke is the Vice Chancellor and Principal at Tshwane University of Technology. Prof. Maluleke, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to your listeners. Long time.
Yes, it's been a while. Dr. Anthony Masha is a social realist, academic, and describes himself also as an accidental writer. Dr. Masha, good morning.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. And Thamsanqa Malinga is a columnist and author of Blame Me on Apartheid and A Dream Betrayed. Good morning, Thamsanqa.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning to Doc and to Prof and to the listeners.
I think a good place for us to start, and I know that just listening to those WhatsApp voice notes, there is clearly, at least with the listeners that have gotten in touch with us today, there is a sense of discontent around Human Rights Day. And what this day means, especially in a context where we have such great inequality and it seems things are getting worse for the poor. And, you know, if you have access to resources, if you're middle class, then there's a certain level of privilege that you can enjoy. And that privilege also seems to extend to the ability to which you are then able to access your human rights. Before I get your reflections on this, I want us to listen to what Chief Justice Raymond Zondo had to say earlier on in the week. He was addressing the National Conference on 30 years of human rights in South Africa. And part of what he said was that he told delegates that the country's courts have really done their best to date to enforce all the rights that have been set out in the Bill of Rights.
Our Constitution goes on to confer on the courts that are competent to enforce and defend the fundamental rights in our Bill of Rights the power to grant appropriate relief and allows anyone listed in that section to approach the courts when they feel that their fundamental rights have been violated, and it says the courts may provide relief. Our courts over the past 30 years have done exactly that when they have found that fundamental rights entrenched in the Constitution have been violated in specific cases. All of the rights that are set out in our Bill of Rights can be enforced in our courts. However, the courts, in order for them to be able to properly protect and defend these fundamental rights.
So that's part of what the Chief Justice had to say earlier on in the week. Prof. Mohlahlana, let me begin with you. When we take a look at 30 years, just more holistically, is it fair to say that actually a lot has been done to ensure that the rights that are embedded in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, have been protected by the democratic government?
Yeah, that is it's a tough question, and I think that Chief Justice Zondo was talking particularly in reference to what the courts can and have done whenever they have been asked to do something on the violation of rights. But it's not just a question of what the courts do. It is also a question of what government does, which is what you are coming to with that question. It's also a question of what all the agencies of state that have the power to make the rights a reality do. And it is also a function of the closing of the gap between the ideals contained in the Bill of Rights and their actualization. So if a person has no water, if a person has no access to food and has no access to education, they will not feel that they have a right if that right does not actualize in their own life. But I don't think we should scoff at the fact that we have, as a country, put into place all the fundamentals in terms of making the rights a crucial part of our Constitution. In other words, the rights there may be a gap between their actualization and of the rights, but they actually are part and parcel of our Constitution. They may not be accessible to everyone, but everyone has a right to claim them, even though they may not be able to we don't have equal access to them. I suppose that is the problem. So I think over the past 30 years, there still are a lot of South Africans. I mean, if nearly 50% of South Africans are going hungry, then you do have a problem. There is a disjuncture between the promises in our Bill of Rights and the realization of those rights. And there is work to do for government. There is work to do for all the state agencies. And there's work to do for citizens, actually, also, because we all have a role to play in the realization of these rights.
And I think you've started us off on a really solid note there, Prof. Mohlahlana, because Dr. Masha, the fact that you have these rights as a commitment of our Constitution in some way must lay a standard, right? Does it not say that there is a starting point that we as South Africans have, and the work of democracy, the journey that we are on, is that as we continue to perfect what is happening in this country, then it's a pursuit of making sure that these are accessible to as many, if not all, South Africans as possible.
Professor Mohlahlana talks about if there is common. And the access to these rights by many South Africans are there. But are the outcomes the same? I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who wrote a book, A Quest for Justice, by the name of Mzukisi Ndaha, who was on TV recently talking about it, has been dealt a very severe blow by the very court where he took his matter of having been conned when he tried to buy an SUV from one of the major banks in South Africa. His files got lost in courts. He was taken up and down. He went to all political giants to try and assist him in this court case. But because there were some people who have got so much power to try and dissuade that court case, Zuki Sindaha never got justice in that. And hence he wrote the book, A Quest for Justice. Now, Zuki Sindaha is very well educated. He's a big figure in government. He has access to laptops, emails and everything, lawyers and advocates. And he lost. How about other people? I don't call them ordinary South Africans, but I want to call it other people who don't have access to the same. So are the outcomes the same? Do people get the same outcomes when they approach courts for their rights? That's a question we need to ask ourselves.
Yeah, and you know, I think that often it's such a it's not a simple issue to deal with, right? Without necessarily also then being seen to be questioning the integrity and the credibility of our courts, right? Which leads us into a more serious argument about if we're saying that rights are not accessible to everyone. And the example, Dr. Masha, that you're raising there, I've read that book, in fact. The example that you're raising there, the idea that South Africans more broadly would not be able to access their rights because there is interference by interested parties who perhaps have power in those matters to sway them in a particular direction. Is that something that we can is that an argument we can definitively be making? Is it not just on a case-by-case basis that we should be making that argument?
Yes, it is on a case-by-case basis, but if you keep listening to the number of cases that have had the same complaint, then you begin to wonder what type of justice system do we have where some succeed, some do not. Who you know becomes a big thing. How much money you have becomes a big thing. What type of justice system is that for a country which is democratic like South Africa?
Thamsanqa, let me give you a chance to come in here on this conversation and perhaps begin with your own reflections.
Yeah, let me start off by what Prof. opened with when he was reflecting on the Chief Justice's comments. You know, Prof. did a very good analysis, and in that he said, yes, courts have done quite a lot in terms of making sure that the people's rights are protected, and then people have then use that assurity that the rights are protected and all of that. I feel that.
Thamsanqa, we're going to have to call you back. That connection to you is not great, and I don't want to do your commentary disservice. We can't hear you clearly now. Let me go back to Professor Mohlahlana. Prof. Mohlahlana, what Anthony is saying about how we position perceptions around our justice system and the way in which this impedes people's ability to access justice. And I'm not one that is really in favor of making broad generalizations, especially where the impact of it is significant. But you might have a different view.
No, I take the point that my colleague is making, Doc. Because indeed, if there is a frequency of cases of people who fail to access justice because of of who they are or because of the depth of their pockets in some cases, or lack thereof, we have to be concerned. It is not good enough simply to say, to proclaim rights if those rights cannot be claimed frequently by groups of people. It is a signal that a lot more needs to be done to make sure that there is equality before the law. The right that we are all equal before the law should be seen to be done in the courts. But as I said, the fact that we can claim these rights should not be scoffed at, but we should also be pointing out that if these rights are inaccessible, they might as well not exist, certainly for a lot of South Africans, because any right that is not accessible is as good as not existing. And that's the task. That's the task of the courts. That's the task of government. That's the task of corporate South Africa. That is the task of all citizens to ensure that this gap is closed. Because even with the court, sometimes communities go to court. I just can't think of a particular example now, to say to courts, look, we don't have water, or we are being moved when we shouldn't be moved. And the courts say, stop moving them. And the courts say, give them water. But the courts can't itself give the water. The water has to be given by government, by the local municipality. So you do need an economic platform that enables these rights also, and so that's why we talk about economic rights, and we talk about social rights and other forms of rights. But I agree with my colleague, rights that are simply proclaimed, that are frequently inaccessible to a good number of people, even if it is one or two people, the number actually doesn't matter. It means that those rights effectively do not exist for all. And if they don't exist for all, we have a big problem.
Anthony, in what ways do you believe that the South African government can be assisting in creating better connection between the meaning of a day like Human Rights Day and the people of this country? And it almost seems ironic that I have to even ask that question, because if we look at Sharpeville, it is South Africans that were killed at Sharpeville. Their families are still living with the pain of what that massacre inflicted on them. There are people who still have bullets in their bodies, and who are living with that, who are in Sharpeville. But there is this disconnect. How can we become more connected with a day like today? Not only from an official government level, but I think as South Africans too.
The South African government has done quite enough for people of South Africa through legislation, through enablers and stuff like that. Just before I came to this show to pick up the phone, I drove around town today, and I noticed that it was business as usual. Most shops were open. People were walking about, doing their daily things. The usual hobos, unemployed youth, were dawdling the streets. Instead of being at a stadium somewhere celebrating a day like this. Do you know why? They have lost meaning. They would rather put bread on the table than go to a stadium and listen to a speech by a politician, a speech by someone who won't even help them after today. And so I'm reading a book by Songezo Zibi, Manifesto, A New Vision for South Africa, and on page 98 he says, South Africa is in dire need of firm, decisive leadership. Leadership is broad, but leadership is that which can take us to a state of hope, state of getting rid of the triple challenges of inequality, unemployment, and poverty that is so dire in all the provinces in South Africa at the moment. I would like you to also allow me to state that he also talks about South Africa being a country of scars and taking us from the time of colonialism, apartheid era, to lately state of corruption, incompetence, a society that is violent and equal and in some respects dysfunctional. Now, this has been put in writing. It's there. Everybody can read it. Imagine the anger that youth and unemployed people get when they read such things, with elections just around the corner. So the issue of decisive leadership is important for this country. Issue of putting people back into a state of hope, jubilation, happiness around the country. But this can be done by getting rid of the people, challenges of poverty, inequality, and employment, getting rid of inhumanity, getting rid of corruption, getting rid of incompetent people, an issue that has been written by many social writers such as Moletti Meki, Mompela Rampele, Matt Masheka, James Mashele, Songe Jazibu, Jonathan Jansen, and so on and so forth. We read about these things. Some see it every day. I see such things daily in my life. Let's bring back people to a state of hope. And we hope that after these elections, such is the type of government that we're going to have. Thank you.
Okay. Thamsanqa, I understand we've got you back on the line. Good morning again. Good morning, Thamsanqa. All right, just make sure that you've unmuted yourself there.
Oh, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I think Thamsanqa is in an area with really bad connection. We're not winning with that line at all. And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. We'll see if we can bring him back into the conversation a little later on. I guess the next phase of our conversation then, Prof. Maluleke, will be as we look into the future. You know, one of our listeners this morning said that he's worried about what Human Rights Day in the next 20 years will be about, because we seem to have removed it and divorced it of the Sharpeville massacre. And he's worried that in 20 years' time, with a new government or with another government, whichever government that might be, the history of the day may be completely lost. What do you make of this argument that says, well, we talk about Sharpeville, but we don't talk about Langa? They happened on the same date, not on the same day, but on the same date. And even with Sharpeville, it's mentioned as a side-by thing, you know, that, there was Sharpeville massacre on Human Rights Day, and not that Human Rights Day is about Sharpeville massacre.
Yeah, Cathy, you may not recall, but not so long ago, I actually wrote an article myself. I write quite often for some op-ed pieces for some of the prominent platforms in the media platforms in the country. Not so long ago, I wrote one which was cheekily titled, "It's not Human Rights Day, it's Sharpeville Day." Got me into a bit of trouble for writing that, but so there is no argument for me about the need for us to remember the 21st of March. Because if you don't remember what happened on this day in 1960, you will not be able to move away from the problem. I mean, I argue in that article that every so many years we have a massacre in this country. So you could go back to Bullhoek massacre, you come to Sharpeville massacre, you have had Bisho massacre. We have had 1976 massacre. If you like, it was a massacre of school kids. because nearly 1,000 were killed by the end of the Soweto protest. And then more recently, we have had Marikana massacre. So if you don't learn from your history, you are likely to repeat what has happened before if you refuse to look the beast in the eye. And that was part of my argument in that article. I've made that argument before, so I don't want to belabor it. And I think I've written on this a few times also. But I don't think ultimately it's either Sharpeville or human rights, either Bishop or human rights, either Boipatong, for example. I mean, right at the dawn of our democracy, not so far from Sharpeville, actually, we had the Boipatong massacre, which is still almost like a secret in inverted commas in this country. So how we deal with the violence of the past is important, because if we don't deal, we are likely to continue the narrative and the story of violence, which we have seen continue in our country. But as I say, it's not either that or human rights. These massacres are, if you like, the highest point, the highest example of rights of people being trampled. And so we can talk about human rights and Sharpeville. We should be able to talk about human rights and Sharpeville, talk about human rights and Robert Sobukwe and all those who woke up early that morning in Orlando to go and burn their passes. These things need not be disconnected, but we need to form a coherent narrative so that we are able to push forward as a nation. But if we seem to be wanting to blot out some things and lift up some others, then we get into real trouble. And I suspect that the trouble we have been in, especially with the refusal of violence to go away. I mean, you can change the name of the police from South African Police to SAPS. And you can change the name of the army, but if you haven't dealt with the problems of state brutality, it will continue until we deal with it. So I think I take that argument, but I think it's a lot deeper than just name change, calling it Sharpeville. I think we should talk about all of these things together and create a coherent narrative in the interest of human rights.
You know, Prof, you've put it so well there, just with this idea of a coherent narrative. Anthony, as we're having this conversation, I'm watching visuals right on SABC channel 404, and on the podium is a number of political parties, mainly those on the opposition benches, and they're giving what is their own Sharpeville massacre address event, and it's happening not too far away from where the president and the rest of government is also marking Sharpeville Day. So there is this idea that what the day is said to mean and represent officially is different to what the people on the ground would want it to mean, would want it to signify and symbolize. And there is no coherent narrative, to borrow from Prof. Mohlahlana, about this day.
There is also a bit of a fight regarding this day in terms of which political party owns this day. And I'm going to take you back to an episode at Robben Island when I was in that bus that takes tourists around the Robben Island, and the tour guide talked everything fancy about what had been done by people who were there from the ANC side. And when the bus reached Robert Sobukwe's house, he talked one or two things and briefly brushed it off, and the bus continued. One of the tourists, who seems to be very politically knowledgeable, shouted at the tour guide and said, you seem to be deliberate not to talk about that meeting house there and about what Robert Sobukwe did for this country and everything, because you were one of the people from the other party that benefited from that party. And he ended up saying, I was going to give you a tip, but because of that, I won't. So you can see how sometimes things are skewed deliberately in favor of certain parties so that the other parties have a better picture than others. As Prof says, it's not Human Rights Day, Shuffle Day. And what did Prof do? He got into trouble just for writing that. So can you see this fight? Shuffle Day, Human Rights Day. No, let's move Shuffle Day because it will be seen as a day for victory for Party A. Let's bring this as Human Rights Day so that it blanketly covers everybody. Thank you.
We'll continue the conversation in a moment. I'll also be taking your calls on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial, 086 000 2032. You can also send through your WhatsApp voice notes on 0614.
The SABC Plus app is here to keep you entertained wherever, whenever. You can now stream all your favorite radio and TV shows at the tap of a button. You can also catch up on the latest content at your own pace and convenience. All of this at absolutely no cost. Yes, you heard right. It's free. Simply download SABC Plus from the App Store of your choice or register on www.sabc-plus.com and start binging today. SABC Plus, still home.
The boxing ring will be dominated by hard punches this Friday night. Two-time South African welterweight champion Tulan Evolution Mbengue will confront Leandro Ariel Fonseca from Argentina in the international bout. The Mzansi Africa versus Argentina battle will continue in the main bout, the World Boxing Council WBC Silver Cruiserweight title fight between Tabiso the Rock Mchunu and Yamil Alberto Peralta Jara. This is the Mvelo Boxing Promotions Tournament. Catch the action on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, live this Friday 22 March at 7 p.m. Then on SABC 2 at 10:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game. Get to Discount Pharmacies for great offers for the whole family. Get a free Bionica Defense 100ml micellar water with the purchase of any Bionica Defense Color Foundation from R295 each. Save R119.90 when you buy any two Head & Shoulders Supreme 400ml shampoo or 275ml conditioner for just R160. And buy Baby Things Premium Nappies for just R189.99. Valid until 7 April at Discount Pharmacies. Better health starts here.
Zambia and Malawi both believe they will triumph. However, they must deliver the goods on the court of play. This is the 2025 Regional Netball Qualifiers Africa. Who will conquer the Southern African Derby? All minds are at the Netball World Youth Cup Gibraltar 2025. Catch the superb action at the Rembrandt Hall, University of Pretoria. Zambia versus Malawi, this Thursday, 21 March at 2 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Hashtag SAFM Talking Point.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point. Our guests for this hour, Professor Denyiko Maluleke, Dr. Anthony Masha, and Thamsanqa Malinga, who's a columnist and author. Thamsanqa, we've been having difficulties with your line. I understand you're back on the line. We're going to give it another try. Good morning.
Good morning. I think now I have a better line.
Yes,
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, that's much better. So let me give you a chance then just to weigh in on some of the reflections that have been shared. For me, the phrase that Prof. Maluleke around a coherent narrative, I think is perhaps one of the most succinct ways to describe the problem of what we're experiencing with Human Rights Day and why there is this disconnect between the people of the country and what is intended with the messaging of the day.
Yes. I came in at that time, fortunate to hear what the Prof was saying, and I'm really struggling with this coherent narrative because I got to really listen to him, and as he was talking about the renaming of the police force, the renaming of the defense force, whether we call it Sharpeville Day or whether we call it Human Rights Day, and saying that what we need is a coherent narrative going forward. But then I feel what coherent narrative when we have a state that was actually bequeathed apartheid. I mean, that's what I believe. I believe that we will actually have a government that was bequeathed apartheid, and the government that is actually managing apartheid, and hence it's going to try to destroy your legacies and the history that's reflective of black people, and that's why you will not have your Sharpeville Day. You will have Human Rights Day. So there is not going to be I don't see a coherent narrative going forward, and hence we're not seeing again a situation whereby you have white people also extending an olive branch to black people in the country. We've seen that with the TRC. A lot of the cases in the TRC, the people who went there did not go there with the intention of telling the truth. They went there with the intention of, hey, we want to just get there and make sure that we get amnesty because we appeared before the TRC. It's a state where black people are the ones that are often, extending their olive branch and reconciling. So I do not actually see that that narrative that Prof is talking about, that we will actually get to that point. Hence, this frustration of Human Rights Day and Sharpeville Day, this frustration of Heritage Day, and now it's now being bastardized into, pardon the use of the language, it's now being called the National Pride Day, and so on and so forth, Cathy.
What is the opportunity cost of that, Thamsanqa? What are we losing out of this lack of coherence?
What are we losing in all of this? I think we are losing ourselves as largely the largest pool that is losing is us as black people. We are losing our history. We are losing to a point where we've got to be the ones that are making the sacrifices. I think the opportunity cost of that is that we are the ones that are getting our history distorted. We are the ones that are now being made to accept false narratives out of the government. Earlier on I wanted to talk about what the Prof was saying when he was expanding on what Judge Mduduzi was saying, to say that the courts have made human rights accessible to all. But yes, and the Prof was right in his expansion of what the Chief Justice was saying. But at the end of the day, if you look at it, is justice really, are the courts serving justice for the black people? No, they're not. I mean, the justice that's happening, take a look at the McCarthy case, for example. The court went as far as the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court needed to make a determination, but it did not make a determination. Hence, the court had to then go back to the lowest court. The case could have ended at the Constitutional Court, where and then it had to go back, and it had to fight. So, imagine that. So the opportunity cost is that we are just losing. In all of that, we're losing our history. We're losing benefiting from what the government that we call our own.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to continue with the conversation in a moment. I've got a couple of callers that also want to weigh in.
The boxing ring will be dominated by hard punches this Friday night. Two-time South African welterweight champion Tulan Evolution Mbenge will confront Leandro Ariel Fonseca from Argentina in the international bout. The Mzansi Africa versus Argentina battle will continue in the main bout, the World Boxing Council WBC Silver Cruiserweight title fight between Tabiso the Rock Mchunu and Yamil Alberto Peralta Jara. This is the Mvelo Boxing Promotions Tournament. Catch the action on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, live this Friday 22 March at 7 p.m. Then on SABC 2 at 10:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
In a world where voices are often silenced, democracy stands as a beacon of hope. For decades, we've upheld the values of freedom, equality, and justice. From the streets to the ballot box, every voice matters. As we honor the legacy of democracy, let's remember that it's not just a system, it's a promise of empowerment.
Tribute to democracy, celebrating our shared legacy.
Join us as we celebrate 30 years of our shared legacy of democracy on SABC. Together, we shape the future. SABC, everywhere, for everyone, always.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
All right, we continue the conversation on the talking point. Let me go straight to the phone lines. Mr. Ngubani, good morning.
Good morning, Sis Cathy.
Yes.
It's good to be a happy Human Rights Day.
Yes.
I would like to join the conversation. But you see, the problem, I'll base my input on, there's a concept that they use in law, Sis Cathy. It is called the letter and the spirit of the law. The letter of the law being what is written, which is mechanical interpretation of what is written. But the spirit, which is intangible, which is the purposive interpretation. Now the problem is that in the country, we seem to be bogged down on the letter of our democratic dispensation. We are not focusing on the spirit, which is purposive. How is it happening? We're confusing the order between the cart and the horse. You need both, but it is the horse that must go first and the cart later on. Practically in this case, we seem to be focusing on the non-economic activities, leaving economic activities unattended. That's why there is constipation. That's why there's a lot of confusion. Even today, the conversation of the panelists are focusing on politics, where instead of focusing on what is happening in the economic base of the country, because all the history of South Africa is about the economic base, starting from the refreshment station by the European company, East Indian Company, was about the pocket. They wanted to go to the India, to the east, and they identified South Africa as a refreshment station. The reason behind was economic activity. They ended up expanding. Later on, they ended up establishing mines, discovering mines and minerals. And they ended up fighting among themselves, the Anglo-Boer War of 1899 to 1902. What was at the center was the fight of the economic resources and economic activities. Those who generated resources from minerals, they used their maximum profit to actually expand and reinvest it to other economic sectors. It is upon this basis that in 1994, the economy was in the hands of the few, those who laid their hands on the minerals and its resources are the ones who are even governing even today. And secondly, there's also another issue that I want to bring the context. This holiday was called Sharpeville Day before, and today it is called Human Rights Day. There's a reason for that. It's not just a mechanical change. We need to understand the spirit. The government then said, together with the society, we can't call it a Sharpeville Day as a day of an event. But the Sharpeville was amongst the event at a national stage that took place on that day, but there are many others. So if you confine it into Sharpeville, you make it an event of a local, whereas it has a national character because the people who were marching on this day were raising a national grievance, manifesting itself probably in Sharpeville and other areas, and other people were raising that. And again, we must also not build a Chinese wall. You know, from 1652, the indigenous people staged a fight, a war of resistance against domination and subjugation, led by Amakos, up until 1906. And then from 1906, they moved to the peaceful resistance, peaceful forms of struggle, peaceful forms, up until 1960. And again, the Sharpeville massacre is significant not on its own, because in English they talk about what we call a stroke that broke the camel's back. You know, when there is an accumulation of things, and that one thing that you add on top of things, leading to a qualitative change.
Okay.
So Sharpeville massacre was a stroke that broke the camel's back. But I'm saying, Katie, obviously, all these days and democracy will lose meaning, the people shedding blood and so on. Why? It's because we're putting the cart before the horse. Let's talk about the economy. Look at what we're consuming. It's coming from the developed countries. We're not producing anything as a country. That's what we should be. The people wanted progress and development when they died, laid their blood. And for us to achieve that, we need to fix the economy. Put politics aside. It's economy. We're being dominated as the country, we're the periphery in this global economy. Those are the things that we should be talking about.
Okay. Tami, we're going to have to leave it there. Tami Ngubane is, he's an NEC member at Salga and called in just to add his own voice to this conversation. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time. I've literally just got 45 seconds left of this conversation. Vuyiswa, you're in Parktown North. Vuyiswa, can you keep it to 40 seconds for me?
You're not going to save me justice. I don't think.
All right. Let me do this, Vuyiswa. We'll call you after news. All right. We'll take Vuyiswa after news just to weigh in terms of her own contribution. But maybe, Prof, let me give you a chance to close us off then for this hour.
Thank you very much. I actually agree with the last caller. I think again, for me, it's not either or. It's not either politics or economics. These things go together. Politics is a tool and should be used to help people attain their economic rights. And perhaps more emphasis should be made on economics, but it's not either or, because if you think about it, as I said, the courts can say people have a right to water, but the water must be given to them. People have a right to jobs and to education, but you need to have the economic wherewithal to be able to get those things done. And the question is whether we have used our political power sufficiently enough to create the economic rights or to make economic rights accessible to everyone. And I think that is a legitimate issue to talk about.
All right.
Thank you very much, Cathy.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there. Big thank you to all of our guests, Prof. Denyuko Maluleke, Dr. Anthony Masha, and Thamsanqa Malinga. It's time for the latest news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
In our top stories, wreaths laid at Sharpeville Memorial Site and UN investigators probe more than 50 cyber attacks. Good morning. President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi have laid wreaths on the Sharpeville Memorial Site outside Johannesburg. Ramaphosa is expected to give a keynote address at the National Commemoration of Human Rights Day in Sharpeville. The event will include the commemoration of the 1960 Sharpeville massacre, when apartheid police shot and killed protesters who were marching peacefully against discriminatory past laws. Earlier, Lesufi said the victims of the massacre did not die in vain.
If you do take into consideration something that is very, very key, which is the human rights of all those people, the right to access quality education, to access medical facilities, the right to choose where you want to stay, compared with those days of Group Areas Act, and you compare it with those days where people could not even go to a school that is nearby here. When you come here in the morning and see children of this particular area going to any school of their choice, going to any health facility of their choice, and also going to do whatever that they want to do without any restriction or being asked for any documents, whether they stay in the right area or not, you can see that indeed we've made major meaningful progress. Obviously, we will not defeat all those things at once.
Meanwhile, the leader of Rise Mzansi, Songezo Zibi, who also laid wreaths on the memorial site, says choosing new leaders would be a fitting tribute to the victims of the massacre. He decried the deplorable conditions that the people of Sharpeville live in.
If we want to honor the people that fell in this place 61 years ago, we must make sure that we have different leaders, because they knew 61 years ago that they needed different leaders. Not these leaders who come with a large convoy of cars, with hundreds of bodyguards, shut down streets, live well, drink well, get fat while the people go hungry with no food. This is not the future that the people that fell in this place 61 years ago fought for. We cannot continue like this.
The Water and Sanitation Department says the current mounting water problems in Johannesburg have prompted the city to table a plan to urgently deal with them. Earlier, the Water Research Commission said there was an urgent need to equip young engineers with skills that would enable them to develop innovative solutions in the water sector. The department spokesperson, Kamohelo Mogotsi.
Mr. Mkunu acknowledged efforts being made by the city's water entity, Joburg Water, to deal with infrastructure backlogs and the various interventions they are implementing to deal with the current recurring water outages, including the participation in the daily war room meetings together with the Department of Water and Sanitation, Rand Water, and the other two metros to regularly assess.
A coal company has evicted 2 families from Kromkrans Farm in Carolina, Mpumalanga, to make way for its mining operations. The Arishumen Coal Mining Company allegedly evicted the families after it obtained a court order. The families are in shipping containers in the area while they wait for the mine to build them houses. Some of the affected family members feel the evictions were inhuman.
We have our rights as well. It is not fair to be relocated by force from your home. We are hurt even now. Where they have relocated us, we do not have a place to sleep. We are sleeping in the bush. I'm so disappointed because when I arrived here, I asked them why they relocate me without informing me. I then instructed them to offload my staff. We fought because they did not want to offload.
And finally, a team of UN investigators is looking into more than 50 cyber attacks over 7 years, which it blames on North Korea. It estimates that about $3 billion in cryptocurrencies were stolen to help fund the North's nuclear weapons program. The BBC's Jean Mackenzie reports.
North Korea is subject to some of the strictest sanctions in the world and is increasingly turning to cyber hacking to raise the money it needs to stay afloat and to build weapons. One UN member country estimates Pyongyang is now funding as much as 40% of its weapons development through these illicit hacks. UN investigators say the regime is still managing to make money by selling its coal and other resources abroad. It also earns hundreds of millions through its vast network of factory and construction workers stationed overseas. But none of these cash revenues appear to be as profitable to the regime as stealing cryptocurrency.
Recapping the top story, President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi have laid wreaths on the Sharpeville Memorial site outside Johannesburg. Ramaphosa is expected to give a keynote address at the National Commemoration of Human Rights Day in Sharpeville. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Zambia and Malawi both believe they will triumph. However, they must deliver the goods on the court of play. This is the 2025 Regional Netball Qualifiers Africa. Who will conquer the Southern African Derby? All minds are at the Netball World Youth Cup Gibraltar 2025. Catch the superb action at the Rembrandt Hall, University of Pretoria. Zambia versus Malawi, this Thursday, 21 March at 2 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, it's 7 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the third and final hour of the show. We continue the conversation on the Talking Point. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be taking a look at the concept of school tourism, right? And it comes out of a situation that has developed out of Zimbabwe, where there have been concerns raised about tourists visiting Zimbabwean schools. We'll be finding out about it shortly. Before we get into it, however, there's still so many of your reflections in particular on the situation, on the conversation rather, that we've had in the last hour of the show, specifically looking at Human Rights Day. So Vuyiswa in Parktown North, I want to give you a chance, Vuyiswa, to also have your say in this conversation. There are also some WhatsApp voice notes from our listeners that we didn't get a chance to play in the previous hour. So Vuyiswa, go for it.
Yes, thanks, Cathy, for giving me this opportunity. I wanted to say to the scholars, unfortunately they've left, that it is a well-known secret that Utatu Sobukwe was the most feared politician by the apartheid regime and the world over, because he spoke of land. And shortly before COVID, Benjamin Pokland was at Exclusive Books in Rosebank relaunching the book of Tatu Sobukwe called The Land is Ours. What I want to check here is that we as black people are weak, because we know that Benjamin Pokland is a friend of Sobukwe, but they don't do justice to both Sobukwe and those people that they were close with, politicians especially of that time. He disputed when he was questioned why didn't he write in the book that Umam Veronica, when she visited that Sobukwe in Robben Island, that Sobukwe cried to her and said, the food they're giving me is laced with broken bottles. And I don't think Mom Veronica would lie, and come back and tell the story. So hurt. But Dr. Benjamin Pokland disputed it because they are in charge. They've got the resources to write books, to edit. We don't have. If you go to the community, how many stories you can come up with, 60 pages up to maybe 300 or something of personal stories that people. But I put the blame on the scholars, because there were scholars in that book launch that I cannot name now. They kept quiet when a just lay person raised it, and it's a truth. It's known that his food he was given was laced with broken bottles. All what I want to say is the fear of the African people, the fear of the middle class, the fear of the media personalities, that we are not getting this. And I will never call this day human rights, because I've got also cousins of mine, to my ancestors that suffered that were actually victims of that day, Sharpeville, 1960. I happened to be back home in 2009, and I asked my grandfather, Matiba, because him and my grandmother are cousins, and I asked him about the issue of Robben Island, because I had met a lot of PAC people in the wilderness, and I asked a lot of questions that I had. You know, he was very fair with me and told me a lot of things that I won't disclose here. But the fact is that we need to be honest as Black people if we are to really preserve our history and tell it as it is. When we're in fear of offending white people, we are not going to tell this history. You know, not generations to come will know what happened. So for me, as the hunter keeps on telling the story of the lion, you know,
all right,
it will never, the truth will never be known.
Voiso, you know, what you're saying is so true, and what we need, perhaps even more than creating great opportunity for different people to tell stories, is that we should now also be creating a culture in which we write and tell people stories while they're still alive, give them a chance to tell us their stories in their own words.
But there's a lot of resistance from the white people because they know, and we suffer from this. Once you have this proximity to whiteness, you know, you think uzabathethelela yeqonda lonto and bathethelela acting. They've killed our people. They've done all these things. They have to come up and be honest also and be sincere to everybody and say, really deep down from their heart, so they've benefited so much from all this. Yeah.
All right, Voiso, we're going to leave it there. Voiso out in Parktown North, and there is a reality we cannot run away from, right? That in order for people to write books and produce really good material, they need to be funded to do that, and that's primarily what Voiso is talking about. And we know about the state of the economy, and you know, who are the individuals that are the biggest stakeholders or the biggest owners of this country's economy. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we continue, we'll switch gears and take a look at school tourism and deal with what is unfolding in Zimbabwe.
Namibia and Zambia will share the court, but no outfit agrees to lose the match. They both understand that jubilance comes from victory. This is the 2025 Regional Netball Qualifiers Africa. The road to the Netball World Youth Cup Gibraltar 2025. Witness the clash of Southern African neighbors at the Rembrandt Hall, University of Pretoria. Namibia faces Zambia this Friday, 22 March at 12 midday. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
All right, the final conversation for this morning is with Dr. Kathleen Smithers, who is a lecturer in education in the Charles Sturt School of Education. And we're talking about what is happening in Zimbabwe and this idea of school tourism. Dr. Smithers, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning.
It's such a strange occurrence, you know, until I saw part of the article and the issue raised in the conversation. I didn't know that this could be an issue. But when we talk about this idea of school tourism, in inverted commas, what is the issue? What is happening in Zimbabwe?
Mm-hmm. So school tourism is usually when tourists from mostly America visit a school for 2 to 3 hours at a time, and they will usually hop off their air-conditioned minibus, arrive at the school, have children dance for them, maybe give some gifts to the children like soccer balls or pencils, and then they'll photograph the children, video the children singing and dancing. Usually they'll then be guided around the school by a child, and they'll get to see every single classroom at the school. They'll move around at their own pace, taking their time, and then 2 to 3 hours later, they will get back on their bus and they will leave and go to the next tourist attraction on their itinerary.
I would imagine that part of why schools allow it is perhaps with the hope of they being something for them to either receive by way of partnership, by way of sponsorship in future? Why do schools allow this, as far as you've come to understand?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Most schools in Matabeleland North in Zimbabwe, which is a tourist area of Zimbabwe, have partnerships with schools. The schools have partnerships with tourism companies, and usually the tourism company might provide US dollars for the school, which is very important in the Zimbabwean economy. And they might also provide funding for students through scholarships. They might provide funding for feeding programs so that the kids have 2 hot meals each day at school. And they might also provide bigger projects such as water towers for borehole construction, electricity to the main grid, toilet blocks, classrooms. They might provide desks or textbooks. So there really is a significant benefit to the schools to partner with tourism companies, as they receive large amounts of money sometimes, which is very needed in the Zimbabwean school system. A lot of schools are under-resourced.
It sounds like quite an innovative way of fundraising for schools, but there have been some concerns that are being raised by it, and you're raising concerns. What is the problem?
Mm-hmm. It is a very innovative partnership. That's correct. It's a great way for schools to raise money, to get sponsorship of children, make connections with people that they might not have connections with. But the main problem is the children's learning time is interrupted. Usually the tourists are there for 2 to 3 hours at a time. And the school in particular, in my study, they had over 100 visits a year. So that's 200 to 300 hours of learning time that is being sacrificed for the tourism dollars. And so the main problem is that the learning is disrupted. Teachers can't plan for these disruptions because the tourists might arrive late. They might take longer than usual at the school. And they are coming during the prime learning time usually because it's cooler in the morning rather than in the hot sun in the afternoon. So they come in the morning, which is peak learning time for the children, and it really disrupts the day. So that's the main problem, is that although they provide infrastructure, resources, feeding programs, the children are actually being disrupted in their school day.
And of course, 100 visits per year, if out of 365 days, that's almost about a third of the schooling year that would be disrupted as a result of these tours. But then there's also the issue of the parading of these children, right? And the need that they have to please whoever is there through whatever performances they'll be performing, because they know that if we don't do well, then we might not get the money that we need. It's an incredible amount of pressure to put on young people.
It is. And this is not just a problem with school tourism. I believe this also happens with non-government organizations who might bring donors to view projects or communities where the recipients are required to perform in a certain manner and be smiling and happy and pleased for the donation. And there is also the issue of photography. I think that children being photographed or adults being photographed is inappropriate. I was there for a school term, so I saw several visits, and not once did someone ask me if they could take my photo. It was almost as if they would walk into the classroom and sort of just snap their photo as they kept walking, not taking any care of the people who were in the photograph.
I guess the issue here is that as one would expect with any other child in any other institution, if that child is to be photographed, we need permissions from parents, we need permissions from schools. So, you can't just take pictures, put them online of other people's children and think it's okay, especially if you wouldn't want that with your own child and you wouldn't allow it with your own child.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is the concerning thing here, is that most of the tourists are Americans who are over 50. And I don't think that they would want people in their children's schools, their grandchildren's schools. And I think it's part of that dehumanizing nature of tourism where people become a spectacle. And I just don't think it's appropriate.
Are there other countries where this kind of thing happens?
It's hard to get a scope of it, but from my own research and looking around, most countries actually have this in some form. So, for example, in Zambia and Fiji, there's also tours in India, Kenya. I've also seen this happening in Australia as well, in Indigenous schools. So it's quite widespread, actually, this practice of tourists visiting schools, and it's usually as part of a philanthropic partnership. But it seems to be something that, as of yet, is largely ignored, and people take it for granted in a way that they can walk through schools.
What are the ways you believe in which schools would still be able to retain the benefit of whatever sponsors they're getting from these tourists? And of course, there is an aspect of building, that culture within young people in schools. So the idea of having performances by these school-going children, I don't think is necessarily a bad one. But how do you think it can be structured differently so that it doesn't disrupt the school day so much, so that it doesn't disrupt also the learning of these students?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly is beneficial, and some of the teachers actually did say that they enjoyed that there was that cultural element, because it meant that the children learnt some of the more traditional dances that they might not have learnt otherwise. So I think there's two solutions. The first one is probably not my favorite solution, but it's a practical solution, and that is that if tourists need to be in schools, they should collaborate with the school to find out the time that works for the school. So all of the teachers at the school I did my research at said, we don't mind the tourists coming. They provide many, many benefits. It's good for the children to see people from outside of Zimbabwe. It's good for our school. However, we would prefer if the visits happened in the afternoon. And that was because the school had extracurricular time in the afternoon. The students were still there, but it was the time that was more free. It was not timetabled, and it would have allowed the visits to not interrupt activities if the tourists came at that time. And the other side is that if the tourists came at that time, they would actually be able to interact with the children who were doing choir practice or the children who were doing sports. They would actually get to interact with children in probably a more fun way than watching children write in books. So that's the first solution, and probably the most practical, given that I think that some tourists want to see children and they would not want to just look in a window. But I think the other solution is that tourism companies sponsor schools and they don't parade tourists through them as a result, because these tourism companies have a lot of money. Many of the companies that partnered with schools are multinational, international companies run from America. They charge tourists $370 a day for these tours. I think that they can afford to sponsor schools without having schools as part of their itinerary. The relationship should continue, but they don't need to visit the schools.
Yeah, I'm also just thinking, Kathleen, about what it is that the tourists do with these pictures. Is it about getting home and saying, "Oh, I went to Africa. Look at the schools in Africa. Look at." It's just I'm grappling with the whole idea of it, especially as a tourist attraction. I can understand perhaps, if it happens to be on the way somewhere, which is quite a busy tourist area, and there's some curiosity, but for it to be part of the tour and an itinerary item, I'm really struggling to make sense of it.
And I think
Hello, Kathleen. All right, it looks like sorry, we just had you just broke off there, Kathleen. You can go for it.
Sorry. I was going to say that's part of the danger of this tourism is that it is selling a particular image. And, the schools that are getting these sponsorships are the poorer schools, usually in more rural areas who can't afford these sort of infrastructures through parents' school fees. And so I think that is the danger. It is selling that image of Africa as an impoverished place, which there are some areas of poverty, but there are also some areas of schools which are connected to electricity. There are schools that have running water, and it is portraying a particular image. And one of the school founders who I interviewed actually said to me, I'm worried that one day we'll be too developed and they'll stop coming because they'll see our school as too developed for their tour.
So is this an issue that what is the government in Zimbabwe saying about this issue? Who at the end of the day holds has the deciding power? Is it the school principals? Is it the government? Who has the final say here?
Mm-hmm. I think that the answer depends on the type of school. So in Zimbabwe, there are non-government schools who are allowed to do not whatever they like. They are beholden to the curriculum and they must have certain things to become a registered school. But in these schools, they can get their funding from wherever they like. They just need to meet a certain amount of curriculum hours. And so if they're teaching the curriculum and meeting those curriculum hours, the government, I don't think, can really say where they get their money from. And in some ways, I'd say the government has encouraged the development of these schools through the provision of satellite schools, which are a form of school in Zimbabwe that is recognised as a little under-resourced, and they're partnered with a registered school, and they can become a school without many facilities. Usually they're in the land reclaim areas, and so they enable schools to sort of get a start. But as a result, a lot of these schools are getting funding from different sources, not just tourism. There are also schools funded by mines in Zimbabwe. So that sort of provision allows schools to find funding from different places.
All right, yeah, and to me it seems like such an easy thing to solve. Before I let you go, Kathleen, I want to play this voice note. It looks like it's been sent by one of our listeners who is Zimbabwean.
Mm-hmm. Good morning, Kathy and SFM listeners. I just want to weigh in on this thing of Zimbabwe schools in a different angle. People will come out with so many lot of things. These Americans, Kathy, are doing a good job. Children are eating, children are now drinking clean water. Mm-hmm. But we've got a government, Kathy, which is saying and claiming every day that sanctions are hampering development in Zimbabwe. But Kathy, without these Americans, Zimbabwe was not going to contain this cholera outbreak. So people must appreciate this thing of ZANU-PF telling people that we are not doing anything because of sanctions. It's a lie. Thanks, James Johannesburg.
Okay, all right. What do you make of that, Kathleen?
I think this is certainly the challenge with discussions of this, in that there are so many good elements to what is being done. Children are getting food. Wells and boreholes are being created to enable clean water. Toilet blocks are being built. Classroom blocks are being built. And so I think that it's definitely part of the double-edged sword of this type of tourism, in that there are so many benefits, but at the end of the day, if children are not able to learn in their school, then what is the purpose of the school? And so I think that I would say definitely these partnerships should continue. I just think that they should be less exploitative, and that the tourism companies should listen to schools and allow them to choose when the visits happen and in what way.
All right, we're going to leave it there for this morning. Dr. Kathleen Smithers is a lecturer in education at Charles Sturt School of Education. We'll leave it there with her. Yeah, what a fascinating subject, right? And something that one can easily just look over and not understand the extent to which it is having an impact, particularly on schools in Zimbabwe. I don't think we have school tourism in South Africa. No, I don't see, I haven't seen it happen in this country where, you have tourists specifically visiting schools. Of course, sometimes, depending on the event, perhaps there'll be an event at a school, whether by government or maybe even some tourists, but not to the extent of what is happening in Zimbabwe, unless I'm just living in a bubble and I don't know what is going on. But I don't think that that's an issue that we as a country are dealing with. All right, so it is Human Rights Day, and as part of our obligation, we've got to do some talking and also play you some music. So we've got lined up some songs, I think, in the spirit of the day. We're also watching the commemorations that are taking place at Sharpeville, and this is where the massacre on the day took place, and this is what is being commemorated. President Cyril Ramaphosa will be delivering the keynote address of the day, so we'll also bring you part of that particular event that is unfolding.
People, I love them. They must continue to fight. Tell my people I love them. They must continue to fight. My blood will nourish the tree that will bear the fruits of freedom. Bear the fruits of freedom. My blood will nourish the tree that will bear the fruits of freedom. Khathazekile bona umphefumulo wami iphikade lenkululeko lizawude liphele ithemba lami andiphakamisa amehlo wami andisawabona amaqhawe andisawabona amaqhawe andiphakamisa amehlo wami andisawabona Monday morning. Police arrest my brother for working for a black community. Monday afternoon, went to see my brother. Oh, mama, policeman treated me like a donkey. Easy gunners to city, to la mama. Oh, mama, to la mama. To la
is a South African song. It comes from the townships, reservations, locations near Johannesburg. The children shout from the streets as they see police cars coming to raid their homes for one thing or another. They say, "Khawuleza, mama," which simply means, "Hurry up, mama, and hide. Please don't let them catch you." Khawuleza, mama, khawuleza, mama, khawuleza, mama. Nanga maphoyisa azongenelela, mama, khawuleza, mama. Nanga maphoyisa azongenelela, mama, khawuleza. Jonga, 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 yo khawuleza, mama, yeah, mama, khawuleza. Jonga, 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 yo khawuleza.
All right, and of course, we brought you there Miriam Makeba, Khawuleza, Brenda Fassie, Good Black Woman, and Konaiba Solomon. So that's where we are going to leave it for today on The Talking Point. The show is back with you again tomorrow. It is a Friday, so we will be wrapping up the week. All the best with the rest of your Human Rights Day, and I hope that it is a not only a restive one, but I think also a progressive one when it comes to it, at the very least, the national conversation that we need to have. All right, up next is the book reading.
Think bigger than just a banking partner. Think a team of specialized experts supporting you to make better financial decisions to enable your growth aspirations. Think a strategic partnership providing indispensable advice to help you make the right moves. Think bigger. Think Nedbank Commercial Banking. For more information, visit nedbank.co.za. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider.
Emotions, tension, and drama are on another level as Namibia faces Kenya. Both outfits are looking for the joy of victory. This is the 2025 Regional Netball Qualifiers Africa. African excellence will book the tickets to the Netball World Youth Cup Gibraltar 2025. Witness the incredible action at the Rembrandt Hall, University of Pretoria. Namibia versus Kenya, this Thursday, 21 March at 4 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The SABC TV Licenses Winner Holiday Experience competition has finally come to an end. And we are pleased to announce that Thabo Batye is the overall winner who will be jetting off to Coachella in April with his girlfriend.
I don't even know what to say.
Thabo entered the Winner Holiday Experience with SABC TV Licenses competition last year when it was running between 1 September and the 15th of December. He simply paid his TV license while he was at his grandmother's house in Kimberley, and he was hoping to win a PlayStation at the time. Little did he know that he would win the grand prize to either Coachella or the Bundesliga in Germany. Thabo obviously chose Coachella. Congratulations, Thabo. You are proof that paying your TV license really is the right thing to do. SABC TV Licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Stade Francois enjoys every moment of the top spot of the top 14, and they're not willing to settle for anything less. However, Lyon are fighting to get out of the bottom four. This is the great contest of the French Rugby League. Catch the nail-biting clash between Stade Francois and Lyon this Saturday, 23 March at 6 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
The book reading. Please note the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of Why Men Hate Women, written by Kopano Ratele. Chapter 6. Why There Is No Love in the Plan. In 2018, women and gender non-conforming persons embarked on a well-publicized series of protest actions, mainly under the #Total Shutdown banner, to bring attention to the high level of men's violence against women and gender non-conforming persons. Marches were staged around the country. In Cape Town, for instance, marchers headed to Parliament to deliver their list of 24 demands, while in Pretoria, another group of marchers led by the steering committee of #Total Shutdown went to the union buildings where they called for President Cyril Ramaphosa to come out and receive the same list of demands, which he did. Among the demands were that the president speak out strongly against gender-based violence against women, GBVAW, commit to establishing a process to address and reduce GBVAW, and hold a summit on GBVAW before 30 August 2018. While it did not take place by the given date, the Presidential Summit on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, GBVF, was held in November 2018. One of the outcomes of the summit was the establishment of the Interim Steering Committee on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, ISCGBVF. The committee in turn was tasked with the development of the Emergency Response Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicides, which was published in 2020.
The committee also facilitated the development of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide in the same year. In light of the history of women's fears, hurts, frustrations, anger, death, and outcries against men's violence, the developments initiated by #Total Shutdown and the Organic Movement of Women are both noteworthy and impressive. At the same time, of course, these developments are linked to a history of women's campaigns that should be recognized. Women have been fighting for gender and racial justice for decades. It is not the history of women's struggles against male domination to which I'm drawing attention, though. The development of the National Strategic Plan was an undeniable milestone in women's fight against gender-based violence and femicide. As the plan states, the presence of gender-based violence and femicide in our society is a crisis. This is no exaggeration. I cannot fully bring to mind what it is to be a woman aware of the magnitude of violence in our country. However, because of my awareness of the pervasiveness of violence, even I, in this man's body, can sense to some degree how unbearable it is to live with the knowledge that because you are a woman, you may be harmed not just by strangers, but by men close to you. Irrespective of the precautions they take, many women recognize that random violence lurks nearby. Imagine living with the sense of that danger. Imagine reading on a weekly basis that violence is so close as to be present in your relationship with your partner. What kind of life calculation does a person have to perform to live truly freely in such a society? Even in this man's body, I'm cognizant of what life in a violent society can do to one's interiority. I have an enduring memory of an awareness that pervaded my interior during my youth, that white people could attack me for no reason and that I would die violently from attacks by other young males like me. One's life becomes soaked in a feeling of daily, low-harm psychosocial insecurity. The plan is a strategic document against violence. There is obviously a great deal of thinking and activism that has gone into it. However, even as the plan recognizes violence in intimate partnerships as the common most form of violence in the world, it contains no readily obvious thought of love, of the need for affection, of the desire for belonging. To some degree, the absence of love in a national strategic response to the crisis of GBVF is totally understandable. Why do we have to waste time on love when what we want is for men's violence to stop? And yet it seems much more closer practical and analytical work is necessary to understand the roots of men's violence in love relationships, to understand what goes on in the mind and social life of a man who declares love for a woman and proceeds to harm her. I have used love and care as if they mean one and the same thing. Let me try to correct that. The two do not always coincide. There are important distinctions to be held in mind between care and love. While some might say care is a form of love, it can be argued that love is an intensified, denser, non-erotic, and thus essentially human form of care. Some instances of care include eroticized or non-eroticized love feelings, but the absence of such feelings does not nullify the caring nature of an act. You can receive practical care without being loved. While care is usually, though not always, practical, love can be nearly all affect. It is not unusual for love to involve, for instance, jealousy or possessiveness, qualities that care does not seem to invite. So, why do we need to think of love as a social force and in our work with men? How does one learn to love in a violent society like ours? What realistic counterweight can an ethos of care be in a community or provincial or national plan on gender-based violence and femicide? Should I even be entertaining thoughts on affection and belonging? Because indeed, it may sound as if to ask questions of love is to seek entertainment in a burning house. Let me say it once again. I regard love as a vital social force as much as a fundamental personal need. Love can be a political philosophy, as we know from the Black consciousness movement, just as it can be an intersubjective connective issue. And power is the artery that runs from love as a subjective hunger to love as a cultural bond. As such, both love as a societal trust and love as an individual need cannot be fully conceptualized outside of power in its various shapes. Furthermore, because it is a societal force and not just an emotion felt by individuals, love is able to be exploited or approved by religions, families, or states. It is well known that in some creeds and countries, women have been expected or are enjoined to only desire men, or to be convinced that the best life partner is one from people of their own faith, or are encouraged to seek love from people of only their own color. Ostracization and sometimes even imprisonment are the consequences of defiance. In these examples, then, we already observe the interpretation of violence and love, one being part of structural inhibitions, the other a force for resistance. To insist on love, especially where such love faces barriers, is to fight already existing institutional violence. It would be injudicious for anyone to expect the National Strategic Plan to pay full attention to all the factors that contribute towards the crisis of men's violence, factors that stretch from the minute and momentary unfolding of interaction to macro factors, both contemporary and historical. These factors include the unavoidable intersubjective dynamics as well as economic inequality that bedevil the country and the harsh social conditions in many communities as well as millions of households. These include each individual's own history as a child, how satisfactorily or badly they were cared for, as well as the colonial and apartheid history of gender that brought South Africa to this moment of crisis. And they include the contemporary heteropatriarchal conditions that frame gender and sexual relations. This is a lot. But I'm persuaded that we cannot understand ourselves and how we relate to others violently or kindly, malignly or benevolently, indifferently or gratefully, if we do not consider love. And we need to do more than merely acknowledge it. We need to expand our thinking about love and its objects. Expanding our thinking about love also facilitates the expansion of possibilities of our subjective and social lives. Yet, as I have observed, it is difficult to have a universal definition of love in all its various guises, and this might be seen as an obstacle to harnessing kindness in the fight against different forms of injustice. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why the term love is not mentioned in the body of the National Strategic Plan. Perhaps it is also the reason why love is not considered in other government policies on, for instance, the environment, even if we may love nature, or education, even if the education of the young is informed by caring attitudes, let alone the criminal justice system. It is simply almost impossible to define love once and for all, even when we confine ourselves to one type of love. But we need not confine ourselves to the predominant ways in which love has been thought of in Western psychological theory. We need to consider love as a cultural force, the core of Botho, and use it to counter gender, economic, racial, sexual, and environmental injustice. We need boys and adult men to love shamelessly without fear that others will see them as weak because they care so artlessly. And we need to put love into our government policies and programs. It is not entirely true, though, that the National Strategic Plan does not mention love at all. It does cite the Love Not Hate program. a joint initiative of 6 lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender or intersex, LGBTI civil society organizations focused on homophobic violence and hate crimes. What the National Strategic Plan does not do is place love at the center of fighting gender-based violence and femicide, maybe because love itself is assumed to be the problem. That is violent love.
That was another episode of Why Men Hate Women and Other Reflections on Love, Violence and Masculinity, read by Samson Khumalo. The book is published by Wits University Press and is also available online, www.wetspress.co.za. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursday on The Talking Point. It is produced for SAFM by Jeffrey Matenji. Technical production by Wiseman Manqele.
It's 12 o'clock on Thursday, the 21st of March, 2024. A happy Human Rights Day as we commemorate this day as well, thinking back about those who perished on Sharpeville Day and also remember Langa. So very warm welcome to Update at Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour.
Today, none shall never forget the spirit of Robert Sobukwe. Forward the spirit of Robert Sobukwe.
All eyes on Sharpeville near Vereniging as various political parties, including the government, commemorates the 1960 massacre, and President Cyril Ramaphosa expected to deliver the keynote address at the government official commemoration of Human Rights Day in a short while. Please let us know your views. 41391 is the SMS line number. Can also write to us via X or Facebook at SABC News_radio, and you can send us a WhatsApp voice note on 0826923909. All these stories and more coming up on this Human Rights Day edition of Updated Noon. First, though, let's bring you up to speed with the latest news with Anne Musa.
SABC News, independent and impartial.
Thanks, Sakina. In our top stories, Ramaphosa to address Human Rights Day commemoration, and Mpumalanga Mining Company denies evicting families. Good afternoon. President Cyril Ramaphosa will shortly deliver the keynote address at the national commemoration of Human Rights Day in Sharpeville outside Johannesburg. The event includes the commemoration of the 1960 Sharpeville massacre, when apartheid police shot and killed protesters who were marching peacefully against discriminatory pass laws. Earlier, the president joined the families of the massacre victims in a wreath-laying ceremony. Meanwhile, the PAC Secretary-General Papue says the fight for land remains critical in the liberation of African people from social injustices. He was speaking at the Pilendaba Cemetery in Sharpeville, where the PAC is commemorating the Sharpeville massacre.
The liberation struggle in this country was about the return of the land. And by the return of the land, we mean the economy. If the economy is not yet returned to the African people, it will appear that their struggle was in vain. Because without economy, there's nothing that we can do. We know that our people are still experiencing hardships in terms of service delivery issues, electricity, water, unemployment, and all of that. So as the PAC, we remain very steadfast that once you resolve the issue of the land and you return the land to the African people, some of these injustices will be resolved.
The Arishumeng Mining Company has denied evicting 2 families from Kromkrans Farm in Carolina, Mpumalanga, to make way for its mining operations. It instead says that it has relocated the families for safety reasons, as mining operations are about to resume close to their homes. The families earlier said they were in shipping containers in the area while they wait on the mine to build them houses. The mine's director is Jack Masikwaneng.
We couldn't, in terms of the mine health and safety, to continue with the business of mining. We couldn't last. There are those 2 families which are within the 500 radius. We went as far as now issuing a notice to all stakeholders. We find ourselves in a difficult position. Cannot engage, and if this problem does not get resolved, then we have to opt to retrench
The ANC in KwaZulu-Natal says, according to government, the position of AmaZulu traditional prime minister does not exist. The party is defending the actions of its KwaZulu-Natal chairperson, Sibuniso Duma. Last weekend, Duma prevented the traditional prime minister, Thulasizwe Buthelezi, from speaking during the commemoration of the 110th anniversary of the death of the AmaZulu king, Dinuzulu Kaqetshwayo. The ANC provincial secretary Bekim Tolo says they don't recognize the position of traditional prime minister.
I was a mayor in Kokstad. I've led almost 3 imkhosi yokusoka with the king, the late king. There was never umntwana kaphindangene there. And then the person who will then, when the premier finished speaking, then Mbonisi will therefore inform at that time, he will inform the gathering that the peace, once he said this, let's be ready for the king. We won't even mention species. Let's be ready for the king. Then Inyos will come in and then we'll do those praises and all that. I can tell you it's not true.
And finally, new research from India has found that working in extreme heat can double the risk of miscarriage for working pregnant women. The BBC's Tulip Mazumda reports.
Researchers followed 800 pregnant women. Around half worked in jobs where they were exposed to extreme heat, such as agriculture and construction, and half worked in cooler conditions. They found those who were exposed faced double the risk of miscarriage, stillbirth, preterm birth, and of having a small baby. The authors say the findings are important to women globally, even those in cooler countries such as the UK, because it's the rise in temperatures from what the body is used to that can cause problems.
Recapping the top story, President Cyril Ramaphosa is delivering the keynote address at the National Commemoration of Human Rights Day in Sharpeville, outside Johannesburg. The event includes the commemoration of the 1960 Sharpeville massacre, when apartheid police shot and killed protesters who were marching peacefully against discriminatory pass laws. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Well, thank you and good afternoon, everybody. 7 minutes after 12, President Cyril Ramaphosa has started delivering the keynote address at the Human Rights Day commemoration, the official commemoration in Sharpeville. Most political parties gathered there, but let's take you to that official commemoration. And here's President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Abao ba ileng ba bolawa ka sehloho hona mona Sharpeville. Re ile ra kopana mane mabitleng re be re beya malomo ha re hopola bao ba re sileng. Ke a ba leboha ho ba teng ha bona. Ke tla bua ka Senyesemane. Ka hobane batho hohle South Africa mona ba mametse ntho e re tla e buang mona. Jwale je ka le tseba a re bue dipuo tse tshwanang. Jwale ha o e beya ka Senyesemane le bao ba dulang hole kwana ba khona ukwa ba latele ntho e re buang. Ehlile ba bang ba bona ba teng mona. Ne e tla ba ntho e ntle haholo haeba ne re le bang fela re bua ka Sesotho se tibileng se monate. 64 years have passed since the ground on which we gather here in Sharpeville bore witness and testimony to one of the worst atrocities committed by the apartheid regime against the people of South Africa. And although many decades have passed, we still remember with great sorrow and pain the 69 people who were murdered and many more who were injured and maimed as they protested in peace against the grave injustices that were imposed upon them. Ke ile ka re ha ke bua le bao ba maloko a bao ba re sileng, ha ke ba tadima mahlong, ke bone hore bohloko bono bo ntse bo le teng. Laeba dikeledi a di a rotha, empa ne ke bona hore ka nnete bohloko bo ntse bo le teng. Ntho ena e ileng ya ba hlahela ka 1960 e ntse e le teng bophelong ba bona. We still recall how every black South African, colored and Indian was denied the basic human rights to which they were entitled. We recall how many generations of black South Africans were denied the right to life and dignity, the right to equal treatment, the right to vote, and the right to be heard, the right to live where they wanted to, the right to work where they wanted to work, in any trade they wanted to work in. How they were also denied the right to education and health care, and the right to the protection of the law. So we gather here in Sharpeville on this day so that we may pay tribute to those who fought for the rights that we hold so dear today, so that we may remember the severe hardships they endured and the great sacrifices that they made. Kaobane rimona kachekulena kalebaka la bao ba ileng ba hlokahala ba thuntswa ke maburu hona mona Sharpeville. Rimona kaobane bona ba ile ba nehela ka maphelo a bona. Rimona kaobane ba ile ba ema ka maoto ba re ba no amohela dipasi tsena tsene ba batla hore re di tshware ka nako tsohle. Re mona ka hobane bona ba ile ba re tla lwanela setjhaba. Re a ba leboha, re a ba hlompha. We also gather here so that we may trace our journey as a nation over the last 64 years, from a state of discrimination and repression to a land of democracy and freedom. Ours was a journey of relentless struggle, a struggle that was also supported by many people around the world. As we remember those who sacrificed in our own country, so must we remember those who sacrificed their lives and their freedom in other countries as well in support of our struggle. Some were arrested and they spent days and even years in jail. Some were killed by the bombs of the apartheid regime, and many other people suffered so that we can be free. It was a difficult and dangerous journey that was traveled by community activists, but
Well, that is President Ramaphosa delivering the keynote address at the official commemoration of the Sharpeville massacre. And what's happened is that the PA system has actually just shut down. So this happened as well before his speech, which is quite ironic, where some of the speakers were touching on issues of service delivery. And here you have a situation of the lights going out, and of course the people filling the hall there, they are singing in order to fill the space, so to speak. But I think they may have fixed it. Not too sure if there is sound. Right, they have fixed it very quickly this time around. So let's take you back.
So there were many activists, union organizers, many traditional leaders, as well as religious groupings, as well as freedom fighters, the underground operatives, political prisoners, and those who were in exiles who supported our struggle. It was a struggle that sought above all to achieve a South Africa which belongs to all who live in it, black and white. It was a struggle to realize the rights contained in the Bill of Rights adopted in 1923 by the African National Congress, which called for equal treatment of all people, equal access to land, direct representation and voting rights. As early as 1923, that's what the ANC called for. It was a struggle to give effect to the demands of the African claims of 1943 for the granting of full citizenship, rights and justice for all. Ours was a struggle to realize the vision of the Freedom Charter that was adopted by the Congress of the People in 1955, of a South Africa that is prosperous and free and in which all enjoy equal rights and opportunities. It was these principles and these ideals, these struggles and these sacrifices that enabled the achievement of our democracy and the adoption of the Bill of Rights that is at the center of our democratic constitution. It was therefore fitting in 1996 that President Nelson Mandela should come here to Sharpeville to sign our new constitution into law on the 10th of December 1996. Hantle lona batho ba mona ke lona beng ba constitution yena. Constitution yena ke a lona. Ho feta batho bohle ka hobane President wa rona wa qala o ile a re molaotheo ona o batla ho signa hona mona Sharpeville mo ileng ha etse ntwe sehloho. So this constitution is then inscribed in your hearts and minds, you the people of Sharpeville. This is your constitution. Selemong sena, this year we celebrate 30 years of freedom. And as we celebrate this milestone, we will reflect on the journey that we have taken towards the full realization of the fundamental freedoms contained in our Bill of Rights. Before this Bill of Rights, which is in our Constitution, the majority of us did not have any rights whatsoever. And these rights that we now have contained in our Bill of Rights in the Constitution are rights that we must cherish, are rights that we must protect, and are rights that we must always extend. We will count the elections that we have held every 5 years since 1994. Elections that have been peaceful, free and fair, and that have reflected the will of the people. Ka di 29 tsa May, re ya dikgethong hape. Ke nako eo lona batho ba mona le South Africa kaofela mo re tlameileng hore tokelo ena ya rona ya ho vouta re lo e sebedisa hore mang le mang a bone hore rona re le batho ba mona South Africa re na le tokelo ya.
And yet another glitch there with the PA system as the president is delivering his keynote address at the official Human Rights Commemoration ceremony. This, of course, taking place in Sharpeville outside Vereniging. And the president just basically speaking to the rights that we enjoy today, the price that was paid in order for us to enjoy the civil liberties and the rights that we enjoy. Also punctuating the point that there was a time in this country where those rights were reserved for a select few and not everybody enjoyed them. So this is the situation currently in Sharpeville. And as I said, this started before the president started speaking, where there was this malfunctioning with that PA system. Not sure. At some point, there was an indication that it might have been a generator that wasn't functioning properly. But there seems to be a problem with the power supply to the event. So we are watching the visuals and we'll let you know as soon as the president starts speaking again. For now, every time there is a lull or that PA system cuts out, what happens is that people start singing. And perhaps we can take the opportunities to just get some of the bills paid while we wait.
Rising costs, housing prices, fuel price hikes, diminished consumer buying power, inflation. It's a jungle out there. Who do you trust when the only certainty is uncertainty? You need an investment team who considers it all to give you the advantage. At Prescient Investment Management, we analyze more than 120 million indicators daily because the biggest returns are found in the smallest insights. Discover the future of investing at prescient.co.za. Prescient Investment Management is a registered FSP.
The boxing ring will be dominated by hard punches this Friday night. Two-time South African welterweight champion Tulan Evolution Mbenge will confront Leandro Ariel Fonseca from Argentina in the international bout. The Mzansi Africa versus Argentina battle will continue in the main bout, the World Boxing Council WBC Silver Cruiserweight title fight between Tabiso the Rock Nkunu and Yamil Alberto Peralta Jara. This is the Mvelo Boxing Promotions Tournament. Catch the action on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, live this Friday 22 March at 7 p.m. Then on SABC 2 at 10:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the
So Sharon officing was telling me the way drip is so expensive these days. She's now waiting for her old clothes to come back into fashion. I say, Joza, while you're waiting, why not let your money do the things in a Nedbank Just Invest account where you can get your money after 24 hours notice? Oganchani voiceman.
In Jalo Mabel, you can earn up to 8.75% interest. Anyone can open an investment account via the Money app in under 2 minutes. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. Promo rates apply.
Namibia and Zambia will share the court, but no outfit agrees to lose the match. They both understand that jubilance comes from victory. This is the 2025 Regional Netball Qualifiers Africa. The road to the Netball World Youth Cup Gibraltar 2025. Witness the clash of Southern African neighbors at the Rembrandt Hall, University of Pretoria. Namibia faces Zambia this Friday, 22 March at 12 midday. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
And with that, let's take you back to the keynote address by President Cyril Ramaphosa. This, of course, happening in Sharpeville near Vereniging to commemorate officially the 1960 massacre and, of course, Human Rights Day.
Our judiciary, the vibrancy of our civil society, the activism of our trade union movement, and the freedom of our media. We will list the discriminatory oppressive laws that we scrapped and the progressive legislation that we have introduced to transform our society. As we celebrate 30 years of freedom, we will reflect on the progress we have made with regard to social and economic rights that are contained in our Constitution. We do have much to celebrate. Kaubani, South Africa e re phelang ho yona kajeko lena a e sa tshwana le South Africa ele ya pele ho 1994. Ntho ka nnete di fetohile, ba rata kapa ba rate, ba na le ditsebe kapa ba na ditsebe, ba na le mahlo kapa ba na ona, dintho di fetohile ka nnete. Many of our people in South Africa have been lifted out of poverty. They were defined and relegated to poverty as a result of the apartheid system and colonialism that deliberately dispossessed them, that took their assets that could have been passed on to various generations in the various families. Once those assets had been taken away, land, livestock, and once opportunities were deprived, it resulted in poverty. And in the end, all that could be passed on down the line was generational poverty from generation to generation. And this is what the democratic government has had to be dealing with over the past 30 years to reduce poverty, to give people a better life. Today, 8 out of every 10 households now have proper housing. That was not the case under apartheid. 9 out of every 10 homes now have electricity. That was not the case under apartheid. And I often say, many of our people were load-shared permanently at that stage under apartheid. And now, even as we are dealing with load shedding, we know what a load shedding will be solved and it will come to an end because we've got a clear intention to do so. 9 out of every 10 homes now also have access to clean running water. South Africans now live longer. Far fewer women are dying in childbirth, and far fewer children are dying in infancy. More children from poor families are completing school, passing matric and going on to study at colleges and universities. This has been made possible because we have as a country focused on correcting the injustices of the past and meeting the needs of the poor and the excluded. Le kutlwetse ha premier wa rona bua a re ka April o tlo etsahala mohlolo o tlo ba le mosebetsi o moholo wa o etsa gore bao ba batlang go fumana di-skills ba tle ka pele ba tlo fiwa di-skills ba trainiwe selemo kaofela gore ba fumane di-skills ba tla be ba patalwa ka yona nako eno ha ba ntse ba rutwa go fumana di-skills tsona tseno. Ke mohlolo ke ntho e ntle e tswang ke mmuso ona wa rona wa democracy, mmuso o sa kgethollweng, mmuso o reng ha o sheba batho kaofela o ba bona ba le batho ba heso ba South Africa. E ka ba o lekgowa, o ka ba o mo-India, o ka ba o mo-Khaladi, o ka ba o motho o montsho o tshwana le mmala o tshwanang le wa ka ona o montshontsho le wena wa balwa hare ha tsona kaofela ka hobane mmuso wa rona ha o kgetholle. Mmuso wane wa maobane o no le sehloho o no bolaya batho ka hobane ba ne ba le batho ba bantsho ke wona o no kgetholla. O re ha o sheba motho o montsho o bo o bona e le sekatana fela. Kasheko lena mmuso ona wa rona o re ha o sheba motho, ha o tadima motho o bona a le motho o feletseng, ebile o bona a le motho o montle a tshwana le nna so. Jwale ke mmuso ona wa batho. Working together, we have returned nearly 4 million hectares of land to people who had been dispossessed. Le a hopola he gore bontate moholo wa rona ba ile ba nkelwa lefatshe, ba nkelwa mmu. Hoseng tjena ha ne ke fihla mme o mong o ile a tla a tshwere tokomane a re ba tlo mpha tokomane ya mmu lefatshe le ileng la nkiwa ho bona. Mmuso ona o leka o itlhile wa lokisa ntho tseo tse mpe tse ne di etsahala. We have provided the social grants for children, the elderly, the people with disability, and have also gone a long way also to ensure gore le di grant tsena tsene re di kentse haholo batho ba sa sebetseng. Yona ena e le tsebang haholo e ya 350 se ilo nyollwa jwale, ilo nyollwa jwale. Jwale mamela ke tlamehile hore ke qete ka hobane pula e tla. Jwale la hopola he ditokelo tsena tse re di kentseng setjhabeng, bongata ba tsona ne di siyo. Ntwena ya di grant le di pension tsa bonkgono ba ne ba ifumana hangwe ka morao ha dikgwedi tse tharo. Le ha ba ne ba ifumana ba ne ba fumana e nyanenyana, makgowa bona ba fumana e kima e kana. Jwale President Nelson Mandela o ile a re ha kena mmusong a ba re di tlo lekana go batho bohle, and ha ba jwalo. Pension eno ya bonkgono le yona ilo nyollwa, ilo ya hodimo gore bonkgono ba rona ba phele beterinyana. La hopola he bao ba ne ba kena sekolo ka nako tseno ba tshwana le nna. No re ha o ya sekolong o ya o tshwere ke tlala, o kena sekolo o tshwere ke tlala, o sa utlwi le ntho e ne o rutwa yona. O tswa sekolong o tshwere ke tlala, hono kaofela ho fedile, bana ba ja sekolong jwale. tja sekolong. Economy ya rona le yona e fetohile. Our economy has changed. More and more people have been able to exercise the right to freely choose their trade and occupation. And our economy has trebled over the number of years. While unemployment still remains unacceptably high, the number of South Africans in employment has more than doubled in the last 30 years. And we are going to continue creating jobs. Mona Gauteng, Premier Ona wa rona, o qadile program e ntle haholo, yona ena ya Nasispan. Ra mo leboha hore o qadile project eno. Re batla hore e be teng le di provinceng tsena tse ding ho etsetsa hore ho be le spane le naha ena kaofela. While our journey since 64 years ago has been remarkable, while our 30 years of democracy have seen great changes in the lives of South Africans, our journey is far from complete. The rights for which the residents of Sharpeville fought, the rights that are now enshrined in our Constitution, have yet to be fully realized for all South Africans. As the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission said, and so we continue our journey towards a new society, one that is united, democratic, non-racial, and non-sexist, and we are guided by our Bill of Rights. As we begin the next decade of freedom, we must strive together not only to safeguard the rights of everyone in the country, but to ensure that all may enjoy equal protection and equal benefits of those rights. We must also strive together to ensure that none may claim dominance over another, where there is neither privilege nor disadvantage. We must strive for a society where neither race, nor gender, nor age, nor religion, nor disability, nor marital status, nor sexual orientation determines the circumstances in which a person lives or the opportunities that they have. We must continue our work to redress the injustices of the past, affirming those who have been disadvantaged by unfair discrimination. We must transform our economy so that all people may participate in our economy and may also benefit from this economy. This means that we must continue to implement the policies of broad-based black economic empowerment, to support small businesses and black industrialists, to promote employment equity, to use public and private procurement to empower those who were previously disadvantaged. Ha ke bua ka employment equity, ke bua le ka hore ha mogolo o fapana bo hare ha bo mme le bo ntate ba etsa mosebetsi o tshwanang, re batla hore molao o etse hore megolo ya bo mme le bo ntate ba etsa mosebetsi o tshwanang e lekane megolo eno, go ska ba le hore banna bona ba tla hola e ka hodimo ha ba etsa mosebetsi o tshwanang. It means we must accelerate, yes, our land reform and provide emerging farmers with the resources that they need. We must build more of an equal society so that all people of working age must have an opportunity for decent work. Ho na le bao ba ntse ba tshoha ba re re shebile fela ba na le dilemo tsa 15 ho fihla 35. Che a o jwalo. Le bao ba ka hodimo ha 35 years. Le bona re batla hore ba fumane mesebetsi. Ba tshwane kaofela. Re tshwanetse re etse mesebetsi, re ahe mesebetsi ka tsela e kgolo ka hobane bongata ba batho ba rona a ba sebetse. Le ha ke sheba mona ke a tseba hore bongata ba lona le sebetse. Le tshepa hore mmuso ona wa lona o tla le ahela mesebetsi kapa o tla bula monyetla wa hore le fumane mesebetsi. We must provide support to those who want to run their own businesses and remove many obstacles. Ho na le ba bangata ba batlang ho isebeletsa. Re tlamehile hore re ba thuse ba kgone ho aha the businesses tsa bona. And as we work towards growing an inclusive economy that provides more jobs and greater economic opportunities, we must continue to provide, assistance to the unemployed. In building a society of equals, there can be no instruments more powerful than education. We've made enormous strides in securing the right of everyone to a basic education and to the progressive achievement of access to further education. We have achieved almost universal access to basic education, and we have massively increased access to higher education and training. But there is still much more that we must do to keep young people in school until matric, and to improve the quality and the relevance of what they learn. We must continue to focus expanding access to early childhood development and improve early grade reading. All children need this solid foundation to succeed in their lives. If we are to build a society of equals, we need to bridge the divide between men and women. Already we have made tremendous progress. In South Africa today, girls learn alongside boys in primary and secondary schools and receive early equal education. Last year, more girls passed matric exams and got more distinctions than their male counterparts. Okare banyana bona ba hlalefile ho feta bashimane. Re ntse re iponela. Ha o sheba hantle bana ba fumanang di-distinction ke banana. Bashimane ba salla morao. A ke tsebe hore ba etswa ke eng. Kapo ha ba ya sekolong bona ba etsa ntho tse ding kapo ba shebile ntho tse ding. Empa banyana ke bona ba tswellang pele. Re re a ba tswelle pele ka yona tsela eno. There are currently more female students enrolled in our universities and colleges than males. Close to half members of parliament and our judges, Libo Magistrata, are women. More than 60% of public servants in our government are women. And yet 3/4 of female-headed households live in poverty. Women are more likely to be unemployed than men, and on average, women earn less than men. Women, they also do not get paid for caring for the elderly, for children and other family members. Ba tshwanetse re ba lefiwe le bona ha ba ntse ba etsa mesebetsi ena And what has become a pandemic in our country, women are more vulnerable to violence and abuse at the hands of men. These are the challenges that we need to overcome by ensuring that girls and young women are able to complete their education and pursue their chosen careers by changing attitudes of men towards women in as far as improving the economic situation. There must be no position in society to which women cannot aspire to attain. A society of equals means that we must eliminate all forms of discrimination and disadvantage. We must ensure that persons with disability are free and able to participate in every part of social and economic life. We must also confront the prejudice and ignorance, providing appropriate education and ensure equal access to persons with disabilities. The adoption of the South African Sign Language as the 12th official language reflects both our commitment and our ambition as a nation to improve the circumstances and the prospects of persons with disability. We must be proud, or today we have the 12th language. Yabatu ba buang utana le meona oyeming haufelena. This for us was a great moment of broadening the rights of more and more South Africans. Now, if we are to build a South Africa of equals, a South Africa that belongs to all who live in it, we must end discrimination and intolerance directed to people because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. We must resist efforts of those who want to take us backwards, who express reactionary and hateful views towards members of the LGBTQIA+ community. Rather, we must foster a culture of understanding and acceptance. So, the rights that we won as a result of the struggles of those who fought for our freedom must be rights that we will extend to all South Africans. And it also means for our struggle for justice must not only be limited to South Africa. Re tlameile re lwanele le ditokelo tsa bao ba ntse ba hlopheha le dinaheng tse ding. Ke bua ka batho ba Palestina ko Gaza kwana ba ntse ba bolawa ke ma-Israel. Le bona re tlameile hore re ba lwanele, re bontshe hore re batla hore le bona ba be le ditokelo. Ka hobane ditokelo tsena tse re le lwanelang di tlameile hore e be ditokelo tsa rona kaofela. Re tsamaile leeto le letelele. Our respect for human rights therefore needs to be extended. But we still have a long way to go, and there's still much more to do before everyone can equally exercise the fundamental rights that our Constitution gives them. So on this Human Rights Day, we need to pledge, all of us as South Africans, and each one of us that we will travel this road together. Many have traveled this road with us to achieve this freedom and to get the human rights that are set out in our constitution. So kaofela rona, let us continue to be part of this journey of promoting the rights of all South Africans. Bapela mona South Africa. Kamanzwano le modimo ka nnete wa re hlohonofatsa ka hobane o re tlisetsa pula ke tokelo ya rona gore re fumane pula a re leboheng amandla forward with our government forward ke a leboha.
Well, that was President Cyril Ramaphosa delivering the keynote address at the official commemoration of Human Rights Day and the Sharpeville massacre in Vereniging, or in Sharpeville, just outside Vereniging.
Experience the best of South Africa at the Rancho 2024. Get ready for non-stop thrills, heli flips, and crazy drifts to get everyone going. Bring the little ones into the enchanting world of the Kids Fun Zone, or immerse yourself in a prehistoric adventure at the new Dino Expo. It's not just fun for you, it's Monate for everyone. 28 March to 1 April, Johannesburg Expo Center, Nasrec. Grab your tickets now at rancho.co.za.
The boxing ring will be dominated by hard punches this Friday night. Two-time South African welterweight champion Tulan Evolution Mbenge will confront Leandro Ariel Fonseca from Argentina in the international bout. The Mzansi Africa versus Argentina battle will continue in the main bout. The World Boxing Council WBC Silver Cruiserweight title fight between Tabiso the Rock Mkhunu and Yamil Alberto Peralta Jara. This is the Mvelo Boxing Promotions Tournament. Catch the action on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, live this Friday 22 March at 7 p.m. Then on SABC 2 at 10:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Stade Francois enjoys every moment of the top spot of the top 14, and they're not willing to settle for anything less. However, Lyon are fighting to get out of the bottom four. This is the great contest of the French Rugby League. Catch the nail-biting clash between Stade Francois and Lyon this Saturday, 23 March at 6 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m.
Well, earlier today, various political parties gathered in Sharpeville to commemorate